Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
what do you call the two biggest hits at the all-you-can-eat buffet?
I don't know. What do you call it?
Eternal Wings and the Pizza Tower. Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your Mamma Mia host, Madelyn.
I'm your... I don't know. I've
Papa
got
Pia.
wings. I've got wings host Emma.
And thanks for tuning in to this week's show. This week, we are talking about Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings in the Lost Ocean, being the subtitle of the first one, and Pizza Tower.
Mm-hmm.
Quick, my boyfriend's suggested joke was, he was like, this is a really Madelyn joke. He was like, what do you call it when you've got round discs of dough with sauce and cheese stacked on top of each other?
That's a good one. I like it.
No!
No, I'm just kidding. That was my joke. I don't like that one.
So, two games, two very different games, which usually portends well for a mashup.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Two highly maximalist games here, in their own ways. So let's talk about Baten Kaitos. So Baten Kaitos is a RPG from Monolith Soft of Xenoblade Chronicles, Xeno General series.
Yes.
And Tricrescendo, published by Namco for the GameCube in 2003 or 2004 if you are not in Japan, or 2005 if you're in Europe.
I feel like you were saying recently on one of these podcasts that you wanted more games where you were some sort of like overseer thing.
Yeah, I did say that recently.
Yeah.
I don't remember with regards to what.
I also don't remember it with regards to what, but that's what you are. That's what we got here.
Baten Kaitos does deliver on the, Fire Emblem Three Houses, Sothis, but you're the protagonist.
Right, yeah. That must have been the context.
I guess, but I think I've started Warriors since the 6th week. So maybe it was just a conversation that we were having.
Maybe, yeah.
Which is shocking, because we don't. This is it.
We never talk outside of this, ever.
Yeah.
About anything.
So Baten Kaitos, you might be wondering, that's a weird title. Is that the name of the protagonist? What is that? No. The astrologers and astronomers, probably both, probably relevant to astrology too, I'm sure. But the astronomers in the audience are going, no, dummies, it's a star.
I don't think it really has much to do with the plot, though. There was some reason they named it this, like because they wanted their world to be far away and bright or something. I don't know. Yeah. It was something to that effect. Symbolic of rich nature and the grand worldview.
Sure.
Apparently.
I'll take it.
Via an interview on IGN.
Baten Kaitos is Monolith's first game after the staff left then Squaresoft to continue work. What? No?
Didn't the first Xenogears come out first?
Oh, you're right, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, I misunderstood. They had some issues with getting the rights to that.
Yeah. But I think Xenogears Episode 1 came out in 2002.
Okay, well, let's just have me keep saying stupid things. How about that? One of their first games, their first non-Xeno game, where basically they sort of started work on it. It seemed like they started work on it.
I'm sorry. Xenogears was the Square Enix one. Xenosaga Episode 1 came out in 2002.
This isn't a Xeno podcast, so I didn't learn about that one.
Sorry. I mixed them up too, so we're both stupid. This was their secondary project, while Takahashi was working on Xenosaga. The point is, it's very much not like Xenosaga.
Yes, it's the anti-Xeno, as they
Yes.
describe it.
Yeah.
In some interviews. There's just 2 of them. Well, now there's 2 of them again. But there's Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings in the Lost Ocean. And there's Baten Kaitos Origin, which came out in 2006. And then various false starts on development over the next 5 or 6 years or so, it seemed like. But nothing until just this past fall when a remaster of these 2 games came out for the Nintendo Switch.
Yes. Baten Kaitos Origins called Baten Kaitos 2 in Japan. To explain why the remaster is called Baten Kaitos 1 and 2.
Yes, and it was one of the very last GameCube games to be released in 2006 there.
Neither of them did very well on the GameCube.
They did not.
Yes, they did.
Cult classic.
Fine. It did apparently fine enough for them to get Origins, and then Origins did approximately the same as the first game. And that was really not enough for them to continue to focus on it.
They were hoping that these games would build an audience for RPGs on the GameCube. Which, maybe other RPGs.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. Well, it's just interesting to me to think of. Of course, it makes total sense when you think of Final Fantasy being the dominant RPG, right? But it's interesting to me now because I think of the Switch as being home to so many of these kind of like throwback. I mean, not that Baten Kaitos is a weird game. So this is not exactly what I mean when I think of all these other throwback ones, but I think of the Switch as being home to so many of these kind of old school RPGs or remasters of old RPGs that it's funny to be like, but the GameCube, they felt like, we should try to reach people who have a GameCube.
Yeah. But it's not like the GameCube didn't have things. The main thing was like, I think Tales of Symphonia came out around the same time and sold a lot better, also from Namco, which made it hard to make a case, I think, for Baten Kaitos.
Oops. Anyway, let me tell you about the game, listeners. Do you trust me? Should I throw in some made-up stuff here? You'll never know. Unless you play the... I could have said you'll never know a few months ago, unless you have a GameCube. But now anyone can call me on it.
Yeah.
So you play... Here's Madelyn's lore corner. Like Emma said, you play as a guardian spirit, unseen guardian spirit. So like yourself, I guess. Guiding a dude named Kaitos and his buddies through an adventure in a floating island kingdom in the sky. And so, basically, we gotta have some lore to our floating island kingdom. I feel like floating island kingdoms are like a trope.
Yeah? I mean, like a fantasy trope, yeah.
I just feel like we've talked about a couple of floating island kingdom games semi-recently.
In East, yes, there was Floating Island Kingdom.
Yes. So for this floating island kingdom, in the past, the evil god Malpercio sucked all the water out of the ocean. And heroes defeated him, but the people, they didn't have any oceans or any water anymore, so they had to move to the sky to survive. And of course, when you move to the sky, you eventually grow wings. You evolve wings. So people have wings now in the world of Baten Kaitos.
Yes.
Kaitos, though, has just one wing, Breek, and he has a mechanical one to make his wings useful. And he's out looking for revenge for the death of his grandfather and his little brother. And he makes friends with another traveler named Zelha. And as one does, they accidentally release one of the Magnus, which are powerful magical cards that we'll talk about more, that are keeping Malpercio captured. There's 5 of them that were used to, hold him in. Mm-hmm. And so, it falls into the hands of the evil empire, and they have to stop them from releasing him into the world again. Why do all empires want to release the evil god?
I think it's part of being an empire, perhaps?
Yeah.
Perhaps it's saying something about the nature of an empire? I don't know.
It's an interesting political statement. Anyway, they continue finding these 5 cards that were holding him in were called End Magus. Magus. I keep wanting to be like maggots.
Magnus.
No, End Magnus. And they keep finding them with the goal of keeping them away from the Empire, and then they keep losing them.
Yeah, I loved skimming. I this has been in my backlog, so I didn't look too closely at the plot, but I love skimming through it and being like, and then they just totally effed up again.
Yeah.
Every single time. It's like, good. That's the kind of characters I want to see, to be honest.
So I'll spare Emma in case, and because had we pulled this game from the hat, not that it was in the hat then, I don't think, but had we pulled this game from the hat like a year ago, pre the real announcement of these remasters coming out, I would feel perfectly comfortable being like, here are all the twists of the game.
Yeah.
But given that the remaster just came out and made these games actually playable for the first time in like 20 years, 15 years, let's say, I won't do that. But suffice it to say, there are a lot of twists and turns and betrayals and loss of free will and regaining of free will and life born from science and sacrifice and water.
Love some water.
Look, there is none.
You're right. You're right. They really do love some water. They would love some water.
Anyway, the writer of this was Masato Kato, who wrote the original script for Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
I read this really good, I can't say I can't speak to if it was a good translation, but I read this really interesting translation of interviews with a lot of the development team from an art book. And they said that they chose this guy because his ability to, quote, write passionate dialogue that doesn't sound weird or embarrassing.
That's a good skill.
It's a real skill.
It is.
Like, dang, you really came out and said it.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched a few reviews of the remaster mostly. I just don't like watching or reading reviews of Japanese games from 2004 or 5 because I feel like I have to parse things through them.
We'll talk about that specifically in a few minutes too, probably.
But a couple of the talking about the remasters were like, yeah, like, you know, as a story, if you're going into this like being like, oh, it's like Xenogears or Xenoblade or whatever. It's really more like Chrono Trigger in feeling than it is a lot of Monolith Sauce other stuff, which I think that makes sense, right?
Yeah. So Baten Kaitos was ahead of the trend in that it has a card game based battle system.
Yes.
So it's an RPG. It's turn based. You know, you have a party of characters. All of that sort of classic of the era of these types of games. But yeah, you battle with a very, very large set of Magnus cards, which you capture the essence of items that are found in the world. And, like, that's part of the story, obviously, right, as we just talked about. But it's also the core of the battle system. And in, like, a funky little twist, those cards can change in real time. They're like Pokemon, except in a much more annoying way.
Yes, you can have one of your starting cards for one of the characters is a set of green bananas. So they're not ripe yet. So while they're green bananas, you can use them as an offensive item to chuck at the enemy. However, if you wait enough time, those green bananas will become normal bananas, and then they can be used as a healing item. And then, if you don't use it, it can turn into a rotten banana, and you don't eat the rotten banana. Stupid.
It's really funny. Like, it's a funny system.
Yeah.
And all of this happens in game real time. So this is not at a point where they're like tracking real time while the game is turned off, which will come up in a discussion of speedrunning that I want to have in a little bit. That was super, super interesting. But while the game is playing and while you are not in a menu, time advances forward and yeah, your milk turns into yogurt, turns into cheese.
Yes.
Etc.
Also weird. Well, so that's because the Magnus that you're using are in fact like a canon thing that's happening in the game, right? You are storing those bananas in a Magnus, which is a magic card. Like, actually, it's not just a representation of a banana that you have in your inventory. So
It's a super Tupperware.
yes, essentially, that you can put stuff in, whatever you want into. Another quirk I thought was funny is in Origins, I believe you just get money from battles like a sort of normal RPG way. But in the first one, in order to make money effectively, you have to use a camera Magnus where you can take photographs of enemies that you can then sell for money based on how well you took the picture and how rare the image is.
Somebody loved Pokemon Snap.
That's so funny.
In the card game playing system also involves, I really appreciated this, some poker-inspired elements.
Yes. Well, it's just like what order you want to play them in. I watched like an explanation of like how to play Baten Kaitos, because apparently it does not tutorialize very well unless you like go digging through menus, essentially. But so it's like turn-based. It's like ATB. It's like action time battle, but with cards also. So you have a certain amount of time on each character's turn to play a certain amount of cards. You can only play 2 at a time to start with, but that number starts going up as the game continues. And so if you play pairs or 3 of a kinds or whatever, that will turn into a combo. Or if you play straights, that will also turn into a combo. And the tip that the video I watched said was like, you really just want to do like don't play all of your cards if you can't make a combo. Like just play the cards that you have in your hand that will turn into a combo, essentially. And so you have like attacking turns where you're using your attacking or healing cards or whatever, and then you have defensive turns where you can play as many cards as whatever's attacking you played. So if you try to play as many defensive cards or a combo of defensive cards that will block whatever attack they're sending towards your character. All within a relatively short amount of time, which the remasters have, you can change the battle speed. And the common thing was like, don't do this unless you're doing it like on auto battle or instant KO is also on, because it also shortens the amount of time your turn is. And so you will spend a lot of turns just sort of standing there if you have the battle at 300% speed and have to control it at the same time. So that's the hot gameplay tip.
Yeah, my hot take on Baten Kaitos is it's the kind of... I would be super interested in a game that was like this that was made now.
Yeah.
And the vibe of, you know, whenever you see these remasters where they're like, you can put it on auto battle, you can put it on one hit kill, you can speed up the gameplay. And obviously here, speeding up the gameplay is a real double-edged sword. But whenever I see that, I'm like, oh no, you know, like this is an old game, TM.
Yeah, but I mean, those are there to make it more like you just turn on no encounters while you have to do some backtracking, right? Or whatever.
I know, but I'm like allergic to those kinds of settings, and that's my own fault.
That is your own fault, in fact.
I'm just saying it's the kind of game where I'd think, oh, that seems kind of interesting. Maybe I would dig that if it was released with now gaming sensibility, as opposed to the I'm gonna have to like tweak a bunch of settings to handle the grindiness of the GameCube era and prior. So I did not. I played. It was pizza. I picked pizza to play.
You picked the pizza.
Yeah. I contemplated bots and Kaitos, but as will I'm sure become a theme over these next few months, I have been playing a lot of games and I need to focus.
Yeah. You had a couple topics you wanted to cover.
I sure did have a couple of topics that I wanted to cover. Here's a quick one. We've talked a lot about kind of tortured development processes recently on Talk This, I think. I just happened to pick a lot of games that had a rough time in development. in that art book interview, over and over, the developers were like, they asked them about the development process, and they were basically like, we have no stories. This process was frightening that it ran so smooth, actually.
Yeah.
One of them, the director did say, I heard that the designers who handled the illustrations had a rough time. They drew, and there was no end to it, they said.
Yeah. Yeah, it did. Apparently, initial illustrations had more, like, traditionally anime-style proportions to the faces, that eventually morphed into a more sort of in-between realistic sort of look, which it does, in fact, look weird occasionally. It's an acquired taste, I think, the art style that they ended up settling on. For me,
there are also over 1,000 Magnus cards.
Yes.
So
you also have to draw those. Yes.
Remember that number, listener. I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to save my fun thing for the end. Let's do my not so fun thing. Baten Kaitos Origins specifically had a little moment in the sun recently during the JRPG discourse. I feel like this was last year, but probably it was a couple years ago at this point. Because there's like a particularly sort of egregious G4 review from when it came out in 2006.
Oh, right. I remember this. Yeah.
That was very much like they took some pot shots at India and China, and then they were like, but don't worry, like Japan's not going to usurp us because Baten Kaitos Origins is terrible.
Yeah.
And then went on to spend the whole time sort of like making fun of the protagonist's name, which is not that weird, and also has meaning in Japanese that is symbolically relevant to the game, and just generally being gross. And while I don't think that the actual person who did the review ever responded to it, somebody from G4, formerly from G4, really doubled down.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty rough. I mean, it is sort of the, it's sort of the perfect punching bag type game, for that period of, reviewing games out of Japan. Because it's quite atypical. Well, it's simultaneously, like, typical and quite atypical, which I feel like is what makes it sort of a perfect target for people who don't want to take these games very seriously.
Yeah, it's got like blue-haired, winged sort of anime boy.
Yeah, and like a real quirky battle system, right?
Yeah.
And yeah. And also the first game, apparently Origins was better. They took both of the English dubs out of the remaster, which people were a little bit upset about, because apparently Origins was fine, but the first game's dub is apparently egregiously bad. Like, comically bad. So, there's that as well. Alright,
and final fun anecdote. So you remember how I said there are 1,000 Magnus cards?
Mm-hmm.
So AGDQ kicks off today. This is my speedrunning anecdote for this, but our next game is also very speedrunny, so very speedrunning themed episode here. So, you know, every game has speedrunners, right? And Baten Kaitos has like normal ones, but also normal speedrun category, right, is 100%.
Yeah.
Right? However, you know, Baten Kaitos has over 1,000 Magnus items that you have to get all of to reach 100%. And the run currently takes just a little bit under 338 hours in the world record.
I feel like that can't... They took that to nap in the middle of that. Yes.
So let me give more context here, because there are a bunch of interviews. I don't think this guy is not the record holder now, but they did a bunch of interviews. Vice did an interview, and there's some reporting on that interview from this runner who goes by Baten, who was the previous world record holder when it was more like 340 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason the game is that long is, listeners, you might remember that real-time item evolution system. And so the problem is there is an item that's called splendid hair, and it requires you to find an item called shampoo, and you have to have it for about 2 weeks of in-game real time. That's 336 hours of in-game real time it takes for the Splendid hair to become, for the shampoo to become Splendid hair. Presumably because you keep using the shampoo and, your hair becomes Splendid.
Right.
So yeah, and the problem, of course, is that takes 336 hours of in-game time, plus that doesn't include any time you spend in a menu. And this is an RPG, and there's a lot of items, so it involves some menuing.
Yeah.
So the way that it, works, basically, is that, what the runners have said, if you took this item out and, a couple of other really long waiting items, the speedrun would take more like 80 hours. And even that is still, a fair bit of waiting for items to evolve. So basically they'll plan it where it's I'm going to play, 3 or 4 hours of this a day, and then I will leave it running, and I'll, leave my stream running, and you can just sort of, watch it idle. And actually, this guy got a temporary suspension from Twitch in 2016 for non-gaming content.
That's so funny.
Because he had to, go to sleep.
Man, get that on Games Done Quick.
It's longer than Games Done. It's long, they do it 1 week at a time.
Do you think the speed up on the remaster changes the game a little?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it affects the the item leveling.
Yeah.
Somebody get an interview with this guy.
Yeah, I've got to know. You got to know the new meta for it. Yeah, the Magnus cards are fun. We didn't even cover, you can play 2 of them at the same time, and it'll sometimes, make a new card. The example on the Wikipedia was, you can play honey and melon, and then it'll turn into a honeydew melon. Which, I don't think that's exactly how it works, but it's fine.
It's something like that.
Sure.
No, it's funny. Both of the games this week have some humorous elements.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm saying, I think that this is the kind of game that if you could make a new one for me, I'd be into it.
Mm-hmm.
I have some trepidation about playing the old one because of things like an item that take 336 in-game hours to evolve.
Sure, but you don't have to do that.
I know you don't have to do that, but just the thought that they were yeah, that seems fine. That's enough for me to be I don't know.
Well, I'm excited to go back and play those. Probably next summer or something like that.
You'll have to report on for me if they are good.
Yeah, sure. No, I'll refuse to tell you.
There's so many RPGs. We've talked about a lot of interesting sounding RPGs the past 6 months or so on the podcast. It's difficult to commit.
Yeah. Try Crescendo. I was looking through their thing. They mostly just help out other people. They're primarily a sound development studio, but they have a bunch that was oh yeah, I've heard of that. I wish I could play that. I wish I could play that Wii locked RPG.
Look, Nintendo is slowly but surely bringing everything back.
You're right.
So you never know.
Yeah. Speaking of not slowly and not surely.
And bringing it back.
Pizza Tower.
Yeah, speaking of things Nintendo is not bringing back.
Yeah.
Pizza Tower.
Pizza Tower. 2023 platforming game from a couple guys who called themselves Tour de Pizza for this.
Do you think they're going to regret that name?
I think they will probably change it if they make another one.
Yeah.
It's just 2 guys and some composers, basically. Yeah. So they can do whatever they want.
2 guys who call themselves Sertif, okay, and McPig.
But a lot of small developers and programmers do just have pseudonyms.
No, pseudonyms are fine.
McPig?
I just felt like McPig. It's just funny to make a lot of people write that.
Yeah. So in Pizza Tower, you play as Peppino Spaghetti, an Italian pizza chef who is threatened by Pizza Face, who's a floating pizza. Who
Talking
says,
floating pizza.
Hey, yes. I hoped it would be obvious that he would talk as I continued. And he goes, hey, I'm gonna destroy your pizzeria with my nuclear laser atop my pizza tower. And Peppino, despite being a totally anxious and frightened and sweating mess, does not, in fact, want his pizzeria to be destroyed via nuclear laser. And so he goes to ascend the pizza tower, defeat Pizza Face, and save his pizzeria. And you do this through dashing through various levels, and picking up some ingredients and destroying the supporting pillar and bringing it all crashing down in each level, essentially. Or defeating a boss.
So Pizza Tower is heavily and pointedly inspired by the Wario Land series.
Yes.
And they've particularly called out Wario Land 4, which I think is the 2001 game, as like a really, really key influence. And like partially designed literally to show Nintendo, hey, people like this. You should bring back Wario Land.
Yeah.
Which I like when people are open about it. You know?
Yeah.
Like, lay your cards on the table that you're only doing this because you want them to make a sequel to whatever game. Good for you.
Apparently, Peppino was originally, like, the concept was that it would be like a survival horror game where he fights pizza monsters in his restaurant.
Which, incidentally, is the mashup we would have made of Overcooked and Resident Evil.
Yeah. Yeah. But apparently it just wasn't, that's not the style of game that like RPG Maker or Game Maker can really easily put together, essentially.
Yes, this is a Game Maker game. This game is one of those games whenever I'm like, oh, like tiny teams, like they can't do it anymore. And then
when do you say that?
Every once in a while I feel like I say that on the show. Whenever like we're talking about an old game that's like, some dude pretty much made this on its own. It sold 10 billion copies.
Yeah.
Pizza Tower is that game.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Pizza Tower is, for me, it's a game that I admire from afar. Because I watched some of the gameplay. I've watched it before and seen it. And just something about it, well, really everything about it, like, triggers a deep anxiety response in me. Like, genuinely, I watch it and I feel like I'm going to have a panic attack.
You are Peppino.
I am Peppino Spaghetti. I relate to him too closely to experience his adventures in Pizza Tower.
No, it's so the reason I mentioned sort of both games being speedrunning games is I really feel like this game is sort of like speedrunning the game.
Yes.
Which I feel like is an emerging genre of platformer that is sort of ascendant in the indie or semi-indie platforming space, right? Like I'm thinking of Neon White as very, very different game than Pizza Tower, but sort of at its core, something with a similar goal. And it was interesting to me to read and I played. So we'll talk maybe about the development of Pizza Tower a bit because it's kind of an interesting and unique-ish path that they have taken to release. But I played, there's like a free pre-alpha version of Pizza Tower online. Pizza Tower is currently only for Windows. Had it been for Mac, I might have downloaded it, but they've been clear that they're trying to focus on one platform being good before they put it somewhere else. Mm-hmm. That pressure is going to get to them. There is no way this game does not come to Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
But good for them for being a team of two-ish that's like, actually, we can't do 4 platforms at launch.
Yeah.
Why was I talking about this? Right. I played a little bit of the pre-alpha version online, which I can say just from watching videos of the released one, they have improved the game significantly.
Yes.
But you still got some of the idea of it. And something that I thought was I discovered as I was playing the game and then read about in reviews, is that in Pizza Tower, you know, you think of in platformers of having lives, right? Or having health of some kind. And in Pizza Tower, mostly, with some exceptions in boss fights, you do not have health. It is just a high score game. And the way that you get a high score is by moving as fast as you can. and picking up as many of the pizza topping themed collectibles as you can, and in fighting pizza themed enemies as quickly as you can, and chaining those defeats into combos that give you a higher score, and not hitting them or hitting walls that break your combo and lower your score.
You
and
can
so many of the
lose,
reviews
though,
sort of called out
for what it's worth.
What?
You can lose outside of boss fights.
Yes, you can lose when you are escaping the pizza tower at the end.
Yes, at the end of each level, the way it worked in, this is from Wario Land, essentially, is you destroy a particular thing, and then you have to get out of the level before the timer runs out and you're crushed, I guess, presumably. And you can pick up little extra timers on your way to increase how much time you have left. But if you do not get out before the timer gets out, that is like the one way that you can hit the game over screen on a typical level.
But except for that, throughout, there is pretty much choose your own adventure difficulty, which got called out in a bunch of reviews as being a sort of interesting take on our ongoing difficulty wars in the zeitgeist. I definitely got that, but also as someone who was playing the game very slowly because I couldn't quite figure out the controls on this early build and on my computer that I don't really game on very much, I definitely felt like I was going slow and doing bad. I didn't need the game to tell me I was doing bad. I knew it.
Yeah. It's sort of, it's an interesting sort of learned system as well. One of the reviews I was watching was saying that, like, Peppino has, like, a big move set, but not every move is available after every move. So you have to be sort of, he's like a flow chart, I think. It was on the Polygon overview of it, saying, like, he's like a flow chart. Where after you do a certain move, you have a certain amount of others to continue your momentum, and sometimes something you're trying won't work because it doesn't actually chain into that move. The main difference between Wario Land, sorry.
Yeah, I know, I tried to say Wario Land.
The Wario Land and Pizza Tower is like, I don't know, like 300% faster or something like that.
Yeah, the Surtif, the developer who came on second, first joked, we didn't balance it well, so we just removed the ability to die.
Yeah.
But then in an interview said, the overall idea is we're making a game that's hard to pick up, to explain, and to master, so we're going to lower the stakes, relieving the player and letting them pick up the game at their own pace. Well, until pizza time starts, then the decision of not having health makes the escape sequence even more stressful, as now you can really die, making you lose all your progress in the level. So it's an interesting balance.
You are incentivized to replay levels and get, like, the pizza collectible, though, because there is a bit of a currency system where you do have to get a certain amount before you can open the boss door for the level, essentially.
Yes, at the end of each level you get a grade, the top level of which is P for pizza,
yes.
Which is if you get all of the secrets, all full level combo. And in pizza time, you have the option, if you go really fast, to try to do your escape twice in the allotted time. So you gotta do that. And then you get the P for pizza.
You don't have to get the P for pizza, for what it's worth, to unlock the boss level for the level.
Yes, that feels like a bar that would be too high.
You do have to start doing well. You can't just suck at each level and then progress. It does block you off from progressing.
They did also in this same interview talk about, and I think we encounter this in developer interviews sometimes, we had a bunch of playtesters and they were really helpful because we had to make the game easier a lot.
Yeah.
Because they were like, we think it's really fun when you can, like, perfectly time a level and, like, be really specific and get the high score. But most people, when they can't figure out that you have to jump at a specific pixel in a specific way, will just refund the game.
Yeah. You got to be careful you don't know your game too well, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pizza Tower was in, like, informal early access for a while. They actually ran it through Patreon.
Yeah.
For a while they had, like, monthly builds, and then once they started getting closer, and and had to like focus on it. They started having like yearly builds, but people still supported them on Patreon just to support them, which is an interesting way of doing it, I think. Much more we're two people way of doing it.
Yeah, I didn't find there's a lot of interviews with them sort of about that, like, what was your development process like and that sort of thing, and particularly with this person who came, well, with both of them. But I didn't get to read too much about how did you build that community in the first place? Is it just that everybody was like, Wario Land, there's a hunger for this? It's probably that.
Yeah, I read a little bit. There was a interview on Game Developer with, what's the programmer's name? Sertif?
Yeah.
Where he laid it out as like, McPig was first posting things on Tumblr with Peppino, like little comics, and then moved to Twitter at a time where Twitter was still useful, essentially. And then they ended up making like 2 Discord servers. I don't remember what they're for exactly. And then the Patreon. So it seems to have been just sort of an organic, like, man, we love this Peppino spaghetti fellow. So he sort of had like a following for this character that he was doing comics for, like on his own personal thing, that then was able to transfer over to like, okay, let's make a game with this Mr. Spaghetti fellow.
And it does seem like their development style, much in keeping with the game, being like, just do things really fast. It seems to have just been like, do things really fast, and then like throw it out.
Yes, they have a lot. There's a lot of stuff in some of their pre-development builds that is just like fully not, like whole playable characters and stuff that was like, it's just not in the game at all at this point. It's possible. Maybe they will continue to add to the game now that it's out. But there's also stuff like the game developer interview, he's talking about like there's this whole level where like Peppino's like delivering pizza, and it used to be like there was a cutscene where you got the pizza, and then if you messed up and you came back, the guy would like beat you up and then give you a new pizza, and then there's a cutscene where you would deliver the pizza, and then there's taxi back. So they made all these like little cutscenes, and then they're like, no, this isn't fast enough, in fact. And in fact, these levels now, I think, are not even Peppino. It's the guy who was like giving you the pizza. They just gave him a rat he could ride. And like they have a whole different move set for these like sort of special levels where they're delivering pizza. So there's definitely a lot of quick iteration, which is something you can do when there's just like 2 of you and your composers.
Yeah. And, you know, while Peppino does have a, you know, somewhat limited moveset, normally he always has something special in a level, right? There's something he can pick up, there's some kind of transformation, there's some kind of gimmick that is like just in that level.
Yeah. I watched about like, I don't know, like 7 minutes of a speed run. That's about as much as I could watch of it. And like apparently for speed running, you don't want to pick those up because most of them slow Peppino down in some way.
Interesting.
So they're like in one of the first ones where you can put on like a knight in suit of armor. He was like, this is one of the ones where like you have to use this power up to like break through certain things, but you want to get rid of it like as soon as possible and skip it whenever you can.
That's funny.
In most cases, you want to skip whatever power up it is because there's like a little cutscene, and then the moveset is slightly different. He's not as fast, so yeah. Apparently, those are not very conducive to speedrunning. In fact.
Well, now I know.
Yeah.
I'll call out. We talked in our like indie game aesthetics or just general aesthetics, pixel art. We've talked a lot about pixel art on Talk This and its prevalence in indie games, and that particularly that SNES, NES style. And Pizza Tower, and they've talked about this in some interviews as well, has that sort of throwback style. But this time it's more like 90s Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
So it stands out a little bit in this like indie game landscape where for better or for worse, it's all about aesthetics. What's going to make something indie? And here they've found a different twist on something that's still that kind of throwback style.
Yeah, I don't like it. I'm sorry, Pizza Tower. You don't need me to like it. You have found success for yourself. But I don't know. It stresses me out. The little Peppino in the corner by the combo that's like, over there in like the window. Oh, it scares. I don't like him. I dislike him.
The reviews suggested, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, suggested that this game might be mad funny.
Apparently it does seem like a mad funny game. Yes.
Yeah.
He does make little funny faces. And the level result screens are him like doing weird little stylized things. So, it does seem mad funny.
Along with that, Pizza Tower got very glowing reviews. A lot of reviews that were like, it's eclipsed Wario Land. Like, it's better than the thing that inspired it.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, a break from recent Talk This Games. I feel like we've been talking about a fair number of games lately that were like, they were inspired by this thing, but they're kind of worse.
Yeah.
So critical consensus here seems to be like, it took this and it improved on it. Which is a little easier when the last installment of a game that people liked is more than 20 years old. And
I mean, that's the case for a lot of these, though, so I don't know if that really has to do with it.
That's fair. I can't remember exactly which games I'm thinking of when I'm calling back, so true. Fair enough. But it was nominated for Best Debut Indie Game at the Game Awards, which truly debut. These guys really seem to like learn how to make a game as they went.
Yes.
Didn't win. People got a little heated about it. They got a little heated when it lost Best Soundtrack at Steam Awards too. A little bit of heat.
Yes. Debut indie game's a bit of a weird category. It's unfortunate that I mean Cocoon was technically developed by a debut studio, but by very experienced people in the indie game scene. That happened with Neon White too, I think, when that came out. Yeah. It's just often is like, yeah, they formed a new group that made a game together. I can't wait until they win again with their next team.
Well, that's why I was so surprised. You know, when I saw that this game was nominated for debut indie and that it was, you know, critically acclaimed, had a following, whatever, I kind of assumed that it would be something like that. But no, literally first game.
Yeah.
Except for maybe the hot dog weenie cop game that he mentions in some interviews.
Yeah. Although that seems to have been mostly him figuring out how to make Game Maker so that he could make this game.
Yeah.
So, well, shall we mash up these games?
Sure. Let's see. The speedrun has to be either very long or very short. Just kidding.
There are some shared points of commonality with these games. I think both of them require you to have like different types of reaction time, but like challenge you to have like fast reaction times, right?
Mm-hmm.
They to have funny food things in them.
Food-based humor.
Food-based humor. The both of them are kind of about screw-ups, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're both kind of, all of you are kind of a mess.
Yeah.
You could say that in Pizza Tower, perhaps you are Peppino's pizza angel.
I was going to say that too. I don't think the game thinks that you're playing as Peppino because you're kind of laughing at him.
Yeah. You're Peppino's. Yeah. Pizza face
Papa,
is
perhaps.
His pizza heart.
Papa.
It's Pizza Heart.
Papa.
Okay, whatever.
Or his Little Caesar.
His Little Caesar? Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So there's some commonality points there.
There definitely is.
I'm thinking like you lost something at cards, right? So you're like some sort of sweaty mess. It's like gambled away. You're something. You're
Okay.
You're what kind of restaurant? What is the restaurant that isn't a pizzeria?
What if it's like, I wish I had a better grasp of the plot of this movie. What happens in Uncut Gems?
I don't know.
I don't think
he has a restaurant.
It's not a restaurant, but isn't he like sweaty and gambles away a bunch of money?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, a little bit.
Great.
Uncut Gems game, but with cards specifically.
Yeah.
And
no. What type of restaurant? Let's see. It has to be a type of restaurant. Like, for whatever reason, we've decided that it's fine to make fun of Italian people.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was struggling to think of a restaurant. It's like, who else can I make fun of like an Italian person? Nobody.
Like a sub shop.
Sure, a diner owner.
A diner, yeah.
You've gambled away your diner in an unfortunate game of cards.
Okay.
And there's this guy who's like, you will try to win it back from me, stupid. I'll be in my mansion. And so you have to like wiggle. I don't know what Peppino does. He like wiggles and crawls and scrambles. So you have to scramble your way through the mansion in like platforming challenges, but every once in a while you run into like some sort of like boss character and you have to play like a card-based mini game against them to win passage through the mansion.
Okay, I've got a couple of spices to add, I think.
Okay,
number one. At the end of each boss battle, as an homage to the Baten Kaitos story arc of they find the card and then they lose it.
Right.
Like that has like you're like trying to find like the keys to his mansion or something. There has to be some kind of key item that you're after, and somehow like you think you've won it at cards each time, maybe with the mini boss, but like something happens so that you lose it.
Yeah. Like you think you're going to be able to progress through the mansion in like a normal manner, but in fact you still have to scurry and squeal through it.
Exactly. So I think that's the like, you know, your princess is in another castle, but this time it's a key card or something.
Right.
Like, you know, it's like something, so I can't decide what it would be.
Right.
Something to get into this guy's mansion. It might be something to get into the diner, honestly. I'd kind of prefer it to be getting back into the diner.
Sure. Okay.
Just because, you know, where's the mansion come from? And you can have like freaky stuff under your diner.
But why are you getting it? How are you getting your diner back if you're in your diner?
That's true. I don't know. I haven't figured out the story here, but
Pizza Tower isn't.
You're right. It's not.
It doesn't have to be a mansion. I was just thinking of some stereotypical card shark man. I don't know.
No. If it's a diner, if it could be like if we could give the mansion a name that's some kind of a play on like the International House of Pancakes, that feels like that could be good.
Okay.
Okay, what was my other thing? Oh, yes. Okay, so I want to incorporate the cards into the platforming just a little bit. So, like, the idea and, like, playing on the different power-ups that you can find in Pizza Tower. The idea that you might have a deck of cards that you can play at certain points to, like, give yourself a super high jump or turn yourself into a pancake to wiggle through something or whatever. Diner-themed cards, obviously.
Right. Like
now,
diner-themed neon white.
Like diner-themed neon white, except those cards are guns and not very funny.
They would be funny if they were pancake guns.
That's what I'm saying. So yes, I have created diner neon white. However, I am also kicking around the idea that you have to use those cards sort of strategically because they might be the cards that you have to use to play the mini boss at the end.
Okay. So you like pick them up as you go too.
You pick them up as you go, and if you use them, they're gone. So you have to decide to yourself, do I use the pancake card to wiggle through here to pick up the Croque Madame card?
Right.
Or do I save it?
Yeah. I see. Strategic.
Well, it's an RPG.
Yeah. Right.
The role is pancake.
I think there's something here.
Yeah.
It's got a bit of like Cuphead thrown in there too, you know?
It's the kind of thing that if we iterated on it for 4 or 5 years, backed by our generous patrons, we could really have a gem.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that was pretty good. That was pretty good for us.
Hell yeah.
Starting the year off, is this our first one of the year that's a mashup?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
Starting the year off strong with Talk This mashups. Listeners, this has been another episode of Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Have you played Pizza Tower or Baten Kaitos? Do you wish that you had a tower? It is disappointing that Pizza Tower is not actually about a tower of pizza, despite being inspired by the Leaning Tower of Pisa in its naming. But would you be more likely to try to 100% speedrun Pizza Tower or to 100% speedrun Baten Kaitos, knowing that the Baten Kaitos speedrun involves hundreds of hours of sleeping? Have you ever gone on a quest and lost the key items that you were looking for over and over and over and over and over again? Have you ever found your pizza shop threatened by a sentient pizza with a nuclear laser? If you have thoughts about any of this or anything else we talked about this week, you should hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can learn all about the show, check out the games in the hat, where Emma's going to pull for 2 weeks from now, and read our blog featuring long-running series, Clickbait Boyfriend, and Split Screen. Should I write that? Is Civilization a roguelike blog? Probably should.
My best OPs and EDs annual blog is now up.
Woohoo!
So check that out if you want the objective list.
You have to check it out.
Of my weird hobby.
It's always fun. So check that out. But perhaps most importantly, if you enjoyed the show, you should subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, wherever you can find podcasts. Like, subscribe, leave a review if you're feeling spicy for Talk This. Next week it's Emma's side quest.
We'll see.
So tune in to find out what we'll be talking about, but in 2 weeks we'll know what we're going to be talking about. And Emma, what are the 2 games?
Our 2 games... Well, our old game is going to be World of Goo.
Nice. Okay.
And our new game is going to be Jouissant.
World of Jouissant.
World
I
of
already
Jouissant.
see the joke forming.
There it is, yeah. Jouissant is a French word if you want to look it up before coming up with your joke.
Okay, I will. Listeners, you look it up too, so that when I make a joke that's about the French meaning of Jouissant, you aren't like, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Please study French in the next 2 weeks. Thank you.
Well, that was pretty good sign-off, Emma, but do you have a perhaps more game-themed farewell?
This week, I hope that you do not become a sweaty, scrabbling, pizza, greasy pepino.